Section 52 of The Dream of the Red Chamber, Book 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Elizabeth Buchanan. The Dream of the Red Chamber, Book 1 by Cao Xueqin. Translated by Henry Bencraft Joly. Chapter 22, Part 2. Pao yü was once more unable to fathom her motives, and as he stood outside the window, he kept on calling out, "My dear cousin," in a low tone of voice; but Tai yü paid not the slightest notice to him, so that Pao yü became so melancholy that he drooped his head and was plunged in silence. And though Hsi Jen had, at an early hour, come to know the circumstances, she could not very well at this juncture tender any advice. Pao yü remained standing in such a vacant mood that Tai yü imagined that he had gone back; but when she came to open the door, she caught sight of Pao yü still waiting in there, and as Tai yü did not feel justified to again close the door, Pao yü consequently followed her in. "Everything has," he observed, "a why and a wherefore, which, when spoken out, don't even give people pain; but you will rush into a rage, and all without any rhyme; but to what really does it owe its rise?" "It's well enough, after all, for you to ask me," Tai yü rejoined with an indifferent smile, "but I myself don't know why. But am I here to afford you people amusement, that you will compare me to an actress, and make the whole lot have a laugh at me?" "I never did liken you to anything," Pao yü protested. "Neither did I ever laugh at you; and why then will you get angry with me?" "Was it necessary that you should have done so much as made the comparison?" Tai yü urged; "and was there any need of even any laughter from you? Why, though you mayn't have likened me to anything, or have had a laugh at my expense, you were, yea, more dreadful than those who did compare me to a singing girl and ridiculed me." Pao yü could not find anything with which to refute the argument he had just heard, and Tai yü went on to say, "This offence can, anyhow, be condoned; but what is more, why did you also wink at Yün Erh? What was this idea which you had resolved in your mind? Wasn't it perhaps that if she played with me, she would be demeaning herself and making herself cheap? She's the daughter of a duke or a marquis, and we forsooth the mean progeny of a poor plebeian family; so that, had she diverted herself with me, wouldn't she have exposed herself to being depreciated? Had I perchance said anything in retaliation? This was your idea, wasn't it? But though your purpose was, to be sure, honest enough, that girl wouldn't, however, receive any favours from you, but got angry with you just as much as I did; and though she made me also a tool to do you a good turn, she, on the contrary, asserts that I'm mean by nature, and take pleasure in irritating people in everything. And you again were afraid lest she should have hurt my feelings; but had I had a row with her, what would that have been to you? And had she given me any offence, what concern would that too have been of yours?" When Pao yü heard these words, he at once became alive to the fact that she too had lent an ear to the private conversation he had had a short while back with Hsiang yün. "All because of my fears," he carefully mused within himself, "lest these two should have a misunderstanding, I was induced to come between them and act as a mediator; but I myself have, contrary to my hopes, incurred blame and abuse on both sides. This just accords with what I read the other day in the Nan Hua Ching: 'The ingenious toil, the wise are full of care; the good for nothing seek for nothing; they feed on vegetables and roam where they list; they wander purposeless, like a boat not made fast. The mountain trees,' the text goes on to say, 'lead to their own devastation; the spring conduces to its own plunder,' and so on." And the more he therefore indulged in reflection, the more depressed he felt. "Now there are only these few girls," he proceeded to ponder minutely, "and yet I'm unable to treat them in such a way as to promote perfect harmony; and what will I forsooth do by and by, when there will be more to deal with?" When he had reached this point in his cogitations, he decided that it was really of no avail to agree with her, so that turning round, he was making his way all alone into his apartments. But Lin Daiyu, upon noticing that he had left her side, readily concluded that reflection had marred his spirits, and that he had so thoroughly lost his temper as to be going without even giving vent to a single word; and she could not restrain herself from feeling inwardly more and more irritated. "After you've gone this time," she hastily exclaimed, "don't come again, even for a whole lifetime, and I won't have you either so much as speak to me." Pao yü paid no heed to her, but came back to his rooms, and laying himself down on his bed, he kept on muttering in a state of chagrin; and though Hsi Jen knew full well the reasons of his dejection, she found it difficult to summon up courage to say anything to him at the moment, and she had no alternative but to try and distract him by means of irrelevant matters. "The theatricals which you've seen to day," she consequently observed smiling, "will again lead to performances for several days, and Miss Pao ch'ai will, I'm sure, give a return feast." "Whether she gives a return feast or not," Pao yü rejoined with an apathetic smirk, "is no concern of mine." When Hsi Jen perceived the tone, so unlike that of other days, with which these words were pronounced, "What's this that you're saying?" she therefore remarked as she gave another smile. "In this pleasant and propitious first moon, when all the ladies and young ladies are in high glee, how is it that you are again in a mood of this sort?" "Whether the ladies and my cousins be in high spirits or not," Pao yü replied forcing a grin, "is also perfectly immaterial to me." "They are all," Hsi Jen added smiling, "pleasant and agreeable; and were you also a little pleasant and agreeable, wouldn't it conduce to the enjoyment of the whole company?" "What about the whole company, and they and I?" Pao yü urged. "They all have their mutual friendships, while I, poor fellow, all forlorn, have none to care a rap for me." His remarks had reached this clause, when, inadvertently, the tears trickled down, and Hsi Jen, realising the state of mind he was in, did not venture to say anything further. But as soon as Pao yü had reflected minutely over the sense and import of this sentence, he could not refrain from bursting forth into a loud fit of crying, and turning himself round, he stood up, and drawing near the table, he took up the pencil and eagerly composed these enigmatical lines: "If thou wert me to test, and I were thee to test, our hearts were we to test, and our minds to test, when nought more there remains for us to test, that will yea very well be called a test. And when there's nought to put, we could say to the test, we will a place set up, on which our feet to rest." After he had finished writing, he again gave way to fears that though he himself could unfold their meaning, others, who came to peruse these lines, would not be able to fathom them; and he also went on consequently to indite another stanza, in imitation of the parasitic plant, which he inscribed at the close of the enigma; and when he had read it over a second time, he felt his heart so free of all concern that forthwith he got into his bed and went to sleep. But who would have thought it? Tai yü, upon seeing Pao yü take his departure in such an abrupt manner, designedly made use of the excuse that she was bent upon finding Hsi Jen, to come round and see what he was up to. "He's gone to sleep long ago," Hsi Jen replied. At these words, Tai yü felt inclined to betake herself back at once, but Hsi Jen smiled and said, "Please stop, miss; here's a slip of paper, and see what there is on it." And speedily taking what Pao yü had written a short while back, she handed it over to Tai yü to examine. Tai yü, on perusal, discovered that Pao yü had composed it, at the spur of the moment, when under the influence of resentment, and she could not help thinking it both a matter of ridicule as well as of regret; but she hastily explained to Hsi Jen: "This is written for fun, and there's nothing of any consequence in it." And having concluded this remark, she readily took it along with her to her room, where she conned it over in company with Hsiang yün, handing it also the next day to Pao ch'ai to peruse. The burden of what Pao ch'ai read was: "In what was no concern of mine, I should to thee have paid no heed; for while I humour this, that one to please I don't succeed. Act as thy wish may be; go, come, whene'er thou list, 'tis nought to me; sorrow or joy, without limit or bound, to indulge thou art free. What is this hazy notion about relatives distant or close? For what purpose have I for all these days racked my heart with woes? Even at this time, when I look back and think, my mind no pleasure knows." After having finished its perusal, she went on to glance at the Buddhistic stanza, and smiling, "This being," she soliloquised, "has awakened to a sense of perception, and all through my fault, for it's that ballad of mine yesterday which has incited this. But the subtle devices in all these rationalistic books have a most easy tendency to unsettle the natural disposition, and if to morrow he does actually get up and talk a lot of insane trash, won't his having fostered this idea owe its origin to that ballad of mine? And shan't I have become the prime of all guilty people?" Saying this, she promptly tore the paper, and delivering the pieces to the servant girls, she bade them go at once and burn them. "You shouldn't have torn it," Tai yü remonstrated laughingly, "but wait and I'll ask him about it; so come along all of you, and I vouch I'll make him abandon that idiotic frame of mind and that depraved language." The three of them crossed over, in point of fact, into Pao yü's room, and Tai yü was the first to smile and observe: "Pao yü, may I ask you something? What is most valuable is a precious thing, and what is most firm is jade; but what value do you possess, and what firmness is innate in you?" But as Pao yü could not say anything by way of reply, two of them remarked sneeringly: "With all this doltish bluntness of his, will he after all absorb himself in abstraction?" While Hsiang yün also clapped her hands and laughed: "Cousin Pao has been discomfited." "The latter part of that apothegm of yours," Tai yü continued, "says: 'We would then find some place on which our feet to rest,' which is certainly good, but in my view, its excellence is not as yet complete, and I should still tag on two lines at its close," as she proceeded to recite: "If we do not set up some place on which our feet to rest, for peace and freedom, then it will be best." "There should, in very truth, be this adjunct to make it thoroughly explicit," Pao ch'ai added. "In days of yore, the sixth founder of the southern sect, Hui Neng, came, when he went first in search of his patron, in the Shao Chou district, and upon hearing that the fifth founder, Hung Cheng, was at Huang Mei, he readily entered his service in the capacity of Buddhist cook; and when the fifth founder, prompted by a wish to select a Buddhistic successor, bade his neophytes and all the bonzes to each compose an enigmatical stanza, the one who occupied the upper seat, Sheng Su, recited: "A pu ti tree the body is, the heart so like a stand of mirror bright, on which must needs, by constant careful rubbing, not be left dust to alight." And Hui Neng, who was at this time in the cook house pounding rice, overheard this enigma. "Excellent, it is excellent," he ventured, "but as far as completeness goes, it isn't complete." And having bethought himself of an apothegm, "the Pui Ti," an expression for Buddha or intelligence, he proceeded, "is really no tree, and the resplendent mirror, Buddhistic term for heart, is likewise no stand; and as in fact they do not constitute any tangible objects, how could they be contaminated by particles of dust?" Whereupon the fifth founder at once took his robe and clapdish and handed them to him. Well, the text now of this enigma presents too this identical idea; for the simple fact is that those lines full of subtleties, of a short while back, are not as yet perfected or brought to an issue; and do you forsooth readily give up the task in this manner?" "He hasn't been able to make any reply," Tai yü rejoined sneeringly, "and must therefore be held to be discomfited. But were he even to make suitable answer now, there would be nothing out of the common about it. Anyhow, from this time forth, you mustn't talk about Buddhistic spells; for what even we two know and are able to do, you don't as yet know and can't do; and do you go and concern yourself with abstraction?" Pao yü had, in his own mind, been under the impression that he had attained perception, But when he was unawares and all of a sudden subjected to this question by Tai yü, he soon found it beyond his power to give any ready answer; and when Pao ch'ai furthermore came out with a religious disquisition, by way of illustration, and this on subjects in all of which he had hitherto not seen them display any ability, he communed within himself: "If with their knowledge, which is indeed in advance of that of mine, they haven't as yet attained perception, what need is there for me now to bring upon myself labour and vexation?" "Who has, pray," he hastily inquired smilingly, after arriving at the end of his reflections, "indulged in Buddhistic mysteries? What I did amounts to nothing more than nonsensical trash, written at the spur of the moment, and nothing else." At the close of this remark, all four came to be again on the same terms as of old; but suddenly a servant announced that the Empress, Yuan Ch'un, had despatched a messenger to bring over a lantern conundrum, with the directions that they should all go and guess it; and that after they had found it out, they should each also devise one and send it in. At these words, the four of them left the room with hasty step, and adjourned into dowager lady Chia's drawing room, where they discovered a young eunuch, holding a four cornered, flat topped lantern, of white gauze, which had been specially fabricated for lantern riddles. On the front side, there was already a conundrum, and the whole company were vying with each other in looking at it and making wild guesses, when the young eunuch went on to transmit his orders, saying: "Young ladies, you should not speak out when you are guessing, but each of you should secretly write down the solutions for me to wrap them up, and take them all in together to await Her Majesty's personal inspection as to whether they be correct or not." Section 52.